I'm joined now by the Attorney General of Oregon, Dan Rayfield. Thanks so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me. Of course, would rather be here under better circumstances.
We have some major news here as Donald Trump and his administration have deployed federal troops into Portland. This is the latest city that he's opted to do so, and this comes after threats of having done so in Chicago, New York, New Orleans, other cities and states across the country. So first and foremost, can you speak about the legality of this move? Because there's a lot of uncertainty as to whether he even has the authority to do this.
And absolutely, the first thing that people should just have in the back of their heads is that these are the United States military, right? This is the military that is trained in basic training. They go through specialized schools for deployment overseas, right? And this is being done under the guise of public safety. But if you really want to help public safety, what you normally do is you communicate and you work in partnership with local organizations. And the big crux here that you're seeing is, you have a president that is getting his information via social media and forming opinions and then making these political statements using the United States military to then come into communities where there isn't a factual basis to do so. I think right now you're seeing a lot of whether people post videos online in Portland about how peaceful and calm and amazing as people are riding their bikes. Incredible, compelling stuff to then have this juxtaposition of the United States military coming into a city, right? And we have laws to prevent that. And there's only certain circumstances where a president can override those. For instance, in a rebellion, right? We would want our president to be able to move on. I can tell you with certainty that there isn't a rebellion in Oregon, there isn't an insurrection, and there's nothing going on in Oregon right now that would necessitate the United States military. You know what? We all care about public safety. Work with us. There are resources that I think every city in this country would love to have a partnership with the federal government. That just isn't the case.
Now, in proving out these rationales, these justifications that he needs to be able to send the military in, as you mentioned, there's obviously no rebellion, there's obviously no invasion, there's no failure of the state or the government to be able to uphold its laws. I believe those are the three thresholds that he needs to be able to meet. He will nonetheless say that there is, and in a way, it's kind of subjective for him to just be able to say, like, here's a video that I found online of Antifa rebels taking over Portland, and so that's all I need. That's all of the predication I need to be able to send these troops in. Who is the arbiter at the end of the day of whether or not he has a legitimate justification to be able to send troops in?
Ultimately, the courts are. And what you've seen in California, where a similar lawsuit was filed, they were successful down there. And in fact, Oregon participated in an amicus brief supporting Governor Newsom and Attorney General Bonta as they were successful in court. Same thing in Washington, D.C. Now, I would argue as we sit there, we do want the president to have some of these authorities. We do want courts to give him some deference. However, when the facts are on the ground are absurdly different than what the president is stating, you need to have judges holding the president accountable to following the law, because it is not okay in our democracy, in our country, for the United States military to be deployed in this fashion willy-nilly. Right. And that is why we have been partnering with our governor, and we are ready, should troops be deployed to Oregon, we will be ready to file a very similar lawsuit and hold the president accountable under those circumstances.
There was some video footage of Homeland Security vehicles coming into Portland, and so what's the status? Because I know that oftentimes Trump will just kind of say the thing he intends to do and not go all the way. Sometimes, and very often, he does go all the way. And so, what's the status of this deployment as of right now?
So right now, our governor has been in a conversation with the president, and we are waiting to hear back. We, as a state, the governor has said, no, we are not going to voluntarily mobilize the National Guard. We have a letter from the president saying that if you don't voluntarily mobilize the National Guard, I will do it for you. And that is kind of where the current status is. We're waiting to hear back. So we're a little bit in a conversation, because that's what rational and thoughtful leaders do. You pick up the phone, You talk to each other. What's the reality on the ground? Is it the same as I'm seeing on my social media thread? And you have that conversation. So we've made it very clear to the president that, hey, we have things under the control. We have a Portland police agency that is wonderful and upholding the laws here in Oregon. We have our Oregon State Police that are upholding our laws, and we have a district attorney here in Multnomah County that's doing a wonderful job keeping our communities safe. And so we're waiting to hear back now that we have told the president no. We are not going to voluntarily mobilize our National Guard.
So that's one option, is for the state or Trump to try and nationalize the federalize the National Guard. But what about in an instance like he did in California, which is to just send in Marines, for example? Is that another avenue that he's considering?
We don't have an indication that that is what's going on. I think that may have just been a juxtaposition given where you have the U.S. military forces in Southern California. So here in Oregon, I think the conversation has been around the National Guard. And again, the president has asked our governor to mobilize the National Guard, and we've told him no. So we believe the current conversation to be that the president will do things very similar to what he did in California, as he's going to try and federalize the National Guard under Title 10. One of the statutes, again, as you aptly pointed out, I mean, you got to have a rebellion. There has to be an insurrection, the inability to effectuate laws here in this state. And none of those conditions are present. And we don't believe that he has the authority to use that.
How are you looking at the ongoing lawsuit in California against Trump on this very issue, which I believe is working its way through the Ninth Circuit right now, to kind of inform the legality of his actions, his potential actions in Portland?
Well, if this moves forward here in Oregon, we'll be prepared. We will file incredibly quickly, be in the courts. We expect positive rulings because, again, this is about the facts on the ground. Does the president have the conditions that would allow him to federalize the U.S. military here in our state? That's a big darn deal. That is a heavy concept to use the United States military against its own citizens in a state. And so those are facts that he is going to have to show a judge. And we will make sure that he does that.
Is there a way that if Trump does opt to move ahead with his plan right now, that Oregon can become a party to the lawsuit that, again, is working its way through the Ninth Circuit?
Well, we would file our own lawsuit here in Oregon. That would wind its way through the Oregon federal court system and then likely meet up or possibly meet up with the California case. A lot of the facts are going to be different in each state, different conditions, but the underlying challenges to the president's authority are probably going to be pretty similar. There's also a chance that the president could use a different tactic in federalizing the National Guard here in Oregon. So again, some of these details are still to come. The plan is in Oregon, we want an injunction here in Oregon preventing the president from federalizing the National Guard. Again, we don't think there is any basis in law in our Constitution for using the United States military here in Portland, Oregon.
Is there some concern that you have, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot, if you look back to the 2020 election, for example, and the ways in which Trump had tried to kind of use extrajudicial measures to rig the election. We know that he tried to seize voting machines in Georgia, for example. He didn't have boots on the ground to be able to effectuate that plan. He also didn't have buy-in from senior members of his law enforcement agencies. Bill Barr called his plan to steal the 2020 election, or that the 2020 election was rigged against him. He called it bullshit, and those were his words. Now it's a different scenario. He doesn't have Bill Barr. Bill Barr has been replaced by somebody like Pam Bondi, who is perfectly content to be a supplicant for this president. You've got Kash Patel, you've got Dan Bongino. None of these people are going to offer any legitimate pushback to what he's seeking to do. Is there any concern that, given that he will have buy-in from folks in the law enforcement agencies, that if he's then able to deploy troops onto the ground, and he has these plans that he's already had before in his first term, when he was far less unhinged than he is right now, that we can be in a scenario where he could use members of the military to be able to effectuate some plans to have an impact on subsequent elections?
And this is why it's so important. Everything you said is why it's so darn important that we have attorneys general across this country that are holding the line against a president who's trying to federalize the U.S. military against its own citizens. Incredibly important. It is a big line for this president to cross, and he's crossed over some real significant lines. Right now, we have politicians, frankly, from both parties, that are talking about gaming our electoral system to maintain control of our country and Congress. That's problematic. We should not be having those conversations in this country. We should have integrity in our elections. And as you pointed out, he's done a lot of other things to frankly game our electoral system. Incredibly bothersome. Was it last week we had the president and his appointees trying to influence the free press? There is not a Democrat or Republican in this country that does not agree with the fact that we must at all times have free press. You even had Senator Ted Cruz speaking out against the president and how dangerous this is. You have the hallmark of an effective democracy, an independent judiciary. You have the president attacking judges and our independent judiciary, which is one of the backstops. It is the co-equal branch of government against tyranny of the executive branch. So we're in an incredibly important time. I do feel heartened, right? We have gotten some positive judicial rulings, but you see this attack on our democracy coming on multiple fronts. And that's why it's so important to have attorneys general, governors, and all of our elected officials pushing back. It's so important for people in our community to let our elected officials know this is not okay. And it doesn't matter what party you're from. This is a democracy, and we have foundations, and we have values, and we have to uphold those.
Attorney General Rayfield, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.